When you talk about Arthur Schopenhauer's philosophy on women, the word disturbing often comes up. But not because it's just simple hatred. No, it's because it's filled with something way more unsettling, an unflinching, brutal honesty. His words, they challenge our most comfortable ideas about love, about romance, about relationships. And today, we're going to dive into exactly why they still hit so hard, even after 200 years. Okay, let's just rip the Band-Aid off and start with a quote that would get you absolutely canceled today. Now, before we react, let's just take a breath and try to understand the thinking here. The source material we're looking at argues that Schopenhauer didn't mean women are inferior, he meant their function in the brutal game of survival was fundamentally different. And that really brings us to the core question of this whole explainer. Are we just listening to the bitter ramblings of a lonely old philosopher? Or is there a difficult truth buried in here that we just refuse to look at? Let's try to get past the initial shock and really explore the philosophy behind all the controversy. You see, Schopenhauer wasn't trying to make friends or win any popularity contests. He wasn't interested in making people feel comfortable. His goal was a kind of raw clarity that, honestly, still feels incredibly relevant. He wasn't writing to be accepted. He was just writing down what he believed he saw. To really get Schopenhauer, you have to understand his starting point, and it's bleak. He didn't see life as some beautiful, divine gift. He saw it as a trap, a relentless, painful cycle of suffering. And he believed this whole cycle is driven by a blind, irrational force that controls everything. So, what is this powerful, driving force? He had a name for it, the will. And this idea is the absolute core of his entire philosophy. It's the key that unlocks everything he had to say about gender, love, and life itself. Now, when he says the will, don't think of willpower or conscious choice. No, this is something much more primal. It's the raw, blind, desperate desire that pushes every living thing forward. It's hunger. It's the sex drive. It's that deep, primal instinct to just keep existing, even when existing is painful. And it has no higher purpose, no grand plan, other than to just keep going. So in this big biological machine, Schopenhauer saw men and women as having totally different, but strategic roles. Men were the agents of risk, of history, of confronting uncomfortable truths. Women, on the other hand, were the anchors of life itself. Their entire focus was on preservation, on social harmony, and above all, ensuring the species continues. For him, this wasn't about one being better than the other. It was purely about function. He argued that these traits, which sound so negative, weren't moral flaws. They were survival adaptations. Think about it. In a world where direct physical power belonged to men, a woman's strength, he said, had to come from influence. And that influence was achieved through things like subtlety, charm, and illusion. Okay, so if the will's only goal is to keep the species going, then what about love? What about romance? Well, in this worldview, what we call romance is simply nature's most effective tool, a beautiful, powerful illusion designed for one purpose and one purpose only, making babies. I mean, look at this comparison. We talk about soulmates, purity, this deep spiritual connection. Schopenhauer saw a biological transaction. He argued that the intense attraction we feel isn't based on someone's soul, it's based on genetic utility, an unconscious calculation of what's best for creating the next generation. It is a cold, mechanical, and totally unsentimental way of looking at it. And here's the crucial twist, especially for men. In this framework, they become the biggest victims of the illusion. Clouded by lust, by the will, they don't actually see the real person standing in front of them. Instead, they project an idealized fantasy onto her, and they fall head over heels in love with that projection. They fall for the idea of being loved back. Now, this might all sound like some dusty, ancient philosophy, but the source we're looking at argues these exact same instincts are playing out right now, every day in modern dating. And this brings us to the modern trap of the so-called nice guy, and why Schopenhauer's warnings still feel so chillingly accurate. Just look at this predictable path. We've all seen it. A man gives constant attention, he gives endless validation, he sacrifices his own goals, his own purpose. He basically makes himself completely and totally available. Now, in Schopenhauer's world, that isn't seen as kindness. It's seen as obedience, as low value. In the brutal game of attraction, nature seems to punish total availability and reward the scarcity and power that's signaled by independence. And here's another one of those brutal quotes. But again, the interpretation here isn't that women are immoral. It's that their nature is, at its core, ruthlessly pragmatic. Decisions are based less on abstract ideas of what's fair and more on what provides immediate security and utility. This is why the nice guy, who offers nothing but his complete devotion, so often loses to the man who signals power and resources. So for anyone who's lived through that kind of heartbreak, the core message here is tough but simple. You weren't seen as good. You were seen as predictable, obedient. You were emotionally cheap. You gave away all of your power because you needed that validation so badly, and in doing so, you lost the one thing that actually creates attraction in the first place. But here's the thing. Schopenhauer's philosophy isn't just a grim diagnosis of the problem. It also offers a way out. And the solution isn't to try and change women or to rage against the world. No. The source argues the only solution is for men to change themselves by finally waking up to the illusion. And this right here is the heart of that freedom. The suffering, the pain of rejection, it doesn't actually come from other people. It comes from your own internal dependency. It comes from that deep, unexamined hunger for someone else's approval. The pain is just a symptom of you giving your power away. And once you truly see that, the path forward becomes crystal clear. You stop negotiating away your inner calm. You stop trading your principles and your peace of mind just for the temporary, fleeting high of a connection. You stop making deals that ultimately make you weaker. You just stop. You stop looking for another person to complete you, to make you feel whole, to give you permission to be worthy. The answer is just not out there in someone else's approval. It never was. Instead, all of that work, all of that energy has to be turned inward. You have to start building it in here, inside your own mind, your own principles, your own purpose. It's about building an inner foundation so solid that it doesn't need to be propped up by anyone else, ever. The ultimate goal of this entire journey is a state our source calls sovereignty. And it's not about being cold or detached or unfeeling. It's about emotional independence. It's the quiet courage to walk away from situations that drain you without needing to justify it. It's the wisdom to just let go of the need to be chosen. Because when you finally get to that place, you realize something profound. The ultimate power, the only real freedom, comes from winning by not playing the game at all. You're no longer a pawn in that draining, endless chase for validation because you are finally, truly awake to the illusion. And that leaves us with one final, very powerful question. Schopenhauer's philosophy in many ways is designed to shatter the illusions that cause us so much pain. But once those illusions are gone, once the fantasy is shattered, it's up to you to decide what you're going to build in its place. What does a life based on truth actually look like?